Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of Agrimundo TV podcast. This is our episode 2004, and it's a distinct honor and privilege to have a friend of nearly 50 years, my Menlo classmate, Tom Badalament, who, unbeknownst to us at the time, our lives would run a parallel course of some similarities. We met at Menlo College and back in the good old days. And we'd like to dedicate this episode to dear friends who've left us, Chris Dotson and Jerry Maloney, to name a few. And Tom, I'd like to start out with your music history. I know it plays a big role in your life. Tell us how you first, when, and how you first got involved with music.
Oh God. My mom was a child actress. She was signed to MGM in 1939. She had a 10-year contract, and there was always music in our house. There was always music. And my father's very artistic, although the guy doesn't have a musical bone in his body. But very early, we had piano lessons and guitar lessons, and around eighth grade, a buddy of mine bought a Fender Telecaster guitar, and it's like the clouds parted, and I thought, I know what I want to do with my life. Of course, I saw the Beatles play on Ed Sullivan's show, and I thought, hell, I can do that too. And so very early, I started playing with bands, and I got immersed in music early on, and all the way through high school and college. I played in bands, and while I was at school in California, I had some brushes with fame. I was an Arista recording artist for a very short period of time, and I was introduced to the recording studio, and I loved it. And after my recording contract ended after 2 months, 3 months, something like that. I went to my dad and I said, I think I'd like to go to music school. And he said, he said, give me a degree in business, and he says, you can go off to music school. So I've always loved music, and not from a crazy standpoint, more from a production standpoint. I liked audio post production and working with television and film, and that was my thrust. My office was a recording studio.
So tell me, you're at Menlo, but you're also off playing gigs, and you're down in LA and up in San Francisco. What we hear in the background is one of two jingles, per se, or songs that you've written for us about our five pillars. And that leads us into your produce background. I know that you were on in the advertising world writing jingles before you transitioned into your family's business. Tell us about that time in your life, Tom.
Okay, let's. I'm a graduate student at Wayne State University, and some of my compatriots from class, they got involved in video production, and they knew I did music, and they said, "Hey, can you write some music beds?" And after I didn't graduate. I did not finish my master's degree, but I got into it, and I got a job working for J. Walter Thompson for a short period of time, and all the while, the family is in wholesale produce distribution. They were established in the Detroit area, uh, probably as the preeminent distributor of tropicals, bananas, pineapples, coconuts, avocados. And I used to, I started with JWT, and I mean, really early on, and I would cash my check at my family's warehouse, which was just down the street. And my brother looks at my paycheck. He goes, "That's it, master's degree, and this is all you got to show for it." I said, "I just started there." He says, "Do you have any bennies?" I said, "I just started there." He goes, he throws me a roll of trash bags, and he says, "I bought a truckload of these things. I need someone to go to the stores, the local stores, and sell them." He says, "You want to come work for me?" And I go, "No, I really don't." He says, "I was going to triple your pay." And he says, "You're still driving that piece of shit Volkswagen Rabbit that I had with 350,000 miles on it." And I said, "Mike, I just started there. Give me a chance." "Yeah, okay." He says, "I was going to tell you to go get any car you wanted to get. I wouldn't even argue with you as long as it's American." And I cashed my check, and I'm on my way. And I was still living with my mom and dad at this point. And I'm listening to the behind the dashboard of my Volkswagen Rabbit rattle to the point where I can barely hear my own thoughts. And I'm thinking, what am I talking about? I was a copywriter at JWT. So I'm not writing jingles. I'm writing copy. I'm writing, the little catchphrases that people remember. You deserve a break today. That sort of those catchy one-line things. And I'm thinking, all the stuff I was doing audio post-production was kind of on the side. And all my friends that were throwing me business were not in the advertising business. They were doing television show openings. They were doing pilots. They were doing industrial movie score. So I thought, hell, I can still do that and do this and make three times the amount of money that I'm making at an advertising agency. So I transferred in to Badalament Incorporated, my family's business, and now I started going to supermarket chains and independents. And Detroit's got a very fiercely independent, is a very fierce independent market, and lots of independent retailers, two and three, four stores, five, six stores, but they're all doing fairly well. And my last name was an entree in because they all knew my family and they knew my dad, and I was doing well. And this was just at the time that supermarkets were transitioning from paper grocery bags to plastic bags. And some of my accounts started asking me, he said, hey, can you get us those plastic bags with the handles like I see over at Farmer Jack's or Kroger? And I thought, yeah, I'll see what I can do. So I found a company that did it and I started selling them. And uh, the people from Liberty Paper and Bag, which later sold out to Bunzl, which is a big national distributor, came up and said, "Hey, why don't we become a master distributor to you, and we'll put you in business selling packaging supplies to supermarkets." And my family loved the idea of that because that locally our trucks were going out half empty, and they wanted something that accented the sales that didn't go bad in a week. So very quickly, I had a very good general knowledge about typical grocery packaging, bakery, deli, produce, meat department, meat trays, overwrap films, foils, labels, and I started getting pretty adept at that. And around 1999, I realized that my sales were starting to dwindle somewhat, so I started honing in on processors because they want a consistent source. They want a cheap price, and I could broker it and make the same sort of money that I was making before, and really concentrate on them and forget about the supermarkets. Because at this point, I've already had a pretty good generalist knowledge, and people would ask me, "Hey, can you get me clamshells? Can you do this? Can you get this? Can you do this? Yeah, what kind of price can you get me on that?" And I like that. Uh, but Badalament, the produce wholesale company, started growing with Aldi and other supermarket chains, Save a Lot, Spartan Nash, and they said, "Why don't you sell off this division and come to work for us?" And so I did, and I came to work, and they sent me down to Gulfport, Mississippi, to start a distribution center out there, which was really quite modest. And I learned the business, but I've been in the business, working since I've been about 16, 17.
It's important to interrupt you right now and to explain to our viewers. Badalament Inc., what makes the company so interesting is that, first of all, Tom is describing the packaging division within the corporation.
Right.
But more importantly, Badalament has an amazing history. Less than 1% of produce companies make it to the century mark. Badalament Inc. was founded in 1903. So they closed their doors back in 2005, but still that's a 102-year existence, going through a lot of changes. So I just want to make that clear to everybody why we're diving into this interesting conversation with Tom. So back to that. So Tom, you're down in Gulfport, and the interesting thing you told me, the port of Gulfport was a Chiquita port. And as
Mhm.
long as we've had a relationship with Gulfport going back to 2013, it's been a dole port. So it just shows you how the ports switch allegiances or whoever comes in and negotiates a lease. So tell us about your time in Gulfport, and also I think you were over in Wilmington as well, Wilmington, Delaware.
Well, let me start by telling you that we were a distribution company in Gulfport with no trucks. We had numerous, probably 40 or 50 Transrite trailers, which was a uh, 48 and 53-foot reefer trailers converted over to pressurized banana rooms, and uh, and uh, we were ripening loads for various supermarket chains, and we would initiate the ripening in our trailer, and we would leave it empty at whatever distribution center that we were going to, say Associated Grocers of the South, or however, and they would use our empty trailer at their distribution center as a pool truck. And when they got done in Gulfport, they'd pick up a load and head back out to Birmingham or wherever these supermarket chains were located.
So Tom, we've watched the progression. You're back with the family business. Your family's business is so big that they have a dedicated division to packaging, and now you've moved your way up, and you've been sent down by the family to Gulfport to be involved in the arriving containers. And at the time, it was a Chiquita port, which is news to all of us because we've only known Gulfport as a Dole port, and we know how jealous ports are. So it was a Chiquita port there, and you were the man. So you were the man on the scene in Gulfport. So tell us about that and how this transitions into what Badalament ran, which is really fascinating. Your trucking division.
Well, it was unique because Gulfport was a small satellite, extremely it was extremely productive because we had very little overhead. When I tell you very little overhead, um, we had no trucks down there. We we were running a trucking business with no trucks, which is pretty good. And as far as Dole and Chiquita being at the ports, this was all news to me because I never got into that sort of minutia. Being a distributor based out of Detroit, this was always the produce just to come in. We didn't know that there was some sort of animosity or like sibling rivalry on ports. I don't know. Maybe the big Dole port is out of Freeport, Texas. I could be that, or it could have been in New Orleans. New Orleans had a banana port, but I think a lot of Del Monte came out of New Orleans. Don't know.
Yeah.
Too many brain cells to go.
Let's go back to the transportation, the logistics part of it.
Okay. What do you want to know? The logistics really started to come into play for me when they transferred me up to Wilmington, Delaware, and that was a much larger operation. We were hauling for Kroger, Meyer, Spartan Nash, Giant Eagle, all sorts of supermarket chains, Save a Lot, and we would, in a lot of cases, we would be flipping loads. Whatever it was, it was very busy, and uh, and we had what, three full-time refrigeration guys just to take care of the motors that you knew were going to break down at some point, and that was a pain in the ass too. Let me tell you.
Give us an idea of the scope that you grew to. I think this is a very impressive part of your story.
Well, we would we would have inbound outbound of 100 trailers a day,
Wow.
and not all of them were ours. It would be like uh, we had deals with Dole where they wanted their containers back so they could use them again. And now when they set out into the field, like when it would go to Kroger with just a container, now they lose that reefer container for, I don't know, a while.
Uh-huh.
and uh, and the truckers want to have a bigger vehicle because that backhaul back to the East Coast, it's a smaller container. So they were all looking to do what we had, which was to flip these loads. So it was a win-win for Dole, and it was a and we had just more business coming through all the time. So it was a busy place. We were 24/7, 363 days a year. We were closed for 24 hours on Christmas and Easter, and that's it. And come midnight the following day, they were back at it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you grew that division. You had 450 trucks rolling.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive. That's a huge number. So that's pretty cool. Tom, so let's move on to when your family expands into a logistics, third-party logistics provider, and you're
Mm-hmm.
down at Gulfport. How did that work? What was your function, your role, and how did you interface with the other companies?
My interface was well, you realize I was not a distributor at this point. I would pick up the fruit. The fruit was picked up at the port, brought to us. We would transfer it into our. We'd cross dock it from the Sealand container into a transcribe trailer, and we would initiate ripening. And 36 hours later, it would they would use an empty transcribe trailer as a pull truck, and they would drop off the empty, pick up the full truckload, and head back to whatever distribution center they were going with. So my interface with them, the contract was set up between Chiquita and whoever it was that we were dealing with at that time, and they would just call up and say, we have so many loads coming in, we need to pick up so at this time, or we were at also the mercy of the port because sometimes the boats don't come in on time, so it's just understandable, that sort of thing.
So then you moved from Gulfport to Wilmington. Is that an
Mhm.
account you'd picked up, or you had both ports working at the same time?
We did. I hired a guy to take my place, a local guy, and then I moved down to Wilmington, Delaware, and that was a trip. I mean, I went from a very simple, streamlined operation to sheer bedlam. God, I'll tell you what, it was nuts when I got there. I was in the middle of a snowstorm, and when I got there, I was looking at 500, probably 500 Sealand containers
Wow.
in our place, and it's like, and I said, can I see? Why do we have so many damn Sealand containers? And the guy says, he goes, you don't know how crazy it is here. Well, the guy wasn't very organized. We ended up letting him go. Nice guy, but he wasn't the right guy for the job. And it was a treat to open up the back doors of some of these containers and find bananas that were dead ripe, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And but we lived through it, and it makes us stronger. You know, what
Right.
doesn't kill
Right.
you
How,
makes you
how
stronger.
many years were you based in Wilmington?
Probably 5.
Wow. What an experience. Now,
Yeah.
you were hauling for multiple banana companies, and you had the ripening rooms there at Wilmington, or
Well, at that point, we were hauling for Chiquita and Dole. We had hauled for Del Monte a lot, but I think Del Monte looked at us with a little bit of animosity. I think they looked at us as competition, and we would have hauled for anybody. We just wanted business. You know, we weren't trying to pick up and steal anything. I think if anything, we were a hybrid between the dis, the distributor or the distribution point and the port. Really, that was our MO, and our our we didn't make any money on bringing the bananas out. We made money on the backhaul, and the backhaul would have been meat, which was 10 times the amount that we would get from bananas.
interesting, interesting. So let's go back to the genesis. Your grandfather started the business in 1903. Can you tell us how that evolved and the story there?
Well, he came over from Sicily at age 14, and he had no family out here. And uh, and the Badalamenti last name was kind of famous in Sicily for less than legitimate reasons, and and he came here and he forgot to dot the I when he came through Ellis Island, but he thought this is good. Maybe they'll think I'm French and leave me alone because
Uh-huh.
factions were murdering off a lot of the family at that point.
Uh-huh.
And when he got here, nobody knew who he was, and he got a job stoking furnaces for the Pier Marquette Railroad. And one of his buddies had a horse and a cart, and they were friends. And he says, "Hey," he says, "Tony," he says, "my dad grandfather's name was Tony." He says, "Tony," he says, "I'm going back to Italy to get a wife." He says, "Would you like to take over this route that I have?" And he says, "When I come back, you can find a job or whatever." And he says, "Yeah, I'll do it." And he hated working stoking furnaces. He's a young man, strong
Blame
man,
him,
but
yeah.
terrible, horrible life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And uh, people liked him. He had a nice personality. They liked him, and he'd been doing it for about 6 months, and he got a telegram from his buddy in Italy saying, he says, "Keep the horse, keep the cart." He says, "I'm going to live there. I'm going to stay in Sicily."
Uh-huh.
And my grandfather expanded the business. And he went from having one horse and a cart to having two horses and two carts.
Yeah.
And and just about this time, the predecessor of the truck came along. I forget what the model was. It was a Ford, and that expanded his ability to distribute fruit. And he was full line. He was doing everything. But bananas used to come in on rail cars, just on stalks.
Hmm.
And he saw a way. He had bought a house, and he took the garage and he turned it into a ripening room where he put ethylene gas in there, and he
Wow.
got very adept at it.
Uh,
And uh, one truck turned to two trucks, turned to five trucks,
uh,
and then now the bigger trucks started coming along, and he was processing bananas for Kroger at the time, which was a much smaller company.
right.
The Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, better known as A&P, and the local market, which was extremely independent. He also helped a Jewish fellow by the name of Tom Borman start his first supermarket, and come to find out years later that he actually gave him money to help get his business off the ground. And Tom's Supermarket turned into Farmer Jack's, and they used to be the largest supermarket
And,
chain in
and for
Detroit.
context, this was in the middle of the Depression, right?
Middle of the Depression, yeah.
So your grandfather had really done well for himself that he could afford to give someone money in the hardest time in our history. I mean, that in and of itself is amazing.
Well, it was a new world, and there were so many possibilities. And he had his nose to the grindstone, and his ear to the to the ground, and he he just did well. He did well, and the business grew.
Yeah. And then moving forward, probably after we're going to see some pictures here in the background of Badalament, which was trucking distribution in the
We were
40s, right?
jobbers back then. We were
Okay.
primarily jobbers. We bought bananas, and then my grandfather, as we started growing, he took our building and turned it into a giant conveyor belt, electric conveyor belt. So the bananas would be put on, the stalks would be put on this conveyor system, kind of like meat on a hoof,
Right.
and they would go to a central processing area, and they would uh, cut the bananas into clusters or hands of
Right.
bananas, and after ripening, and they put a sticker,
Uh-huh.
and they were marketing the bananas. United Fruit and Steamship and Castle and Cook were the big companies back then. I don't think Del Monte was even in the banana business at that point. And the United Fruit and Steamship came up to my dad around 1963 and said, Louis, he says, "Would you mind if we take your idea of putting a sticker on the bananas?" He says, "We're going to put them in a box." And my dad said, "Oh, great." I says, "I'll have a lot less labor." And he says, "I don't care. Go ahead, do it." And of course, everybody had it. Castle and Cook had Cabana Banana, and I think Del Monte came in after that. And but we got out of doing the actual packing of bananas into wood boxes
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
would
you
be
were
distributed.
famous for that. You were the first to do that. The Badalament boxes are a real collector's item. We've got a picture of one right here, thanks to Norma. So that made you unique. You guys were really trendsetters.
You know, it's kind of funny. I was in some BFE Cracker Barrel in Alabama, and I stopped for a breakfast. And you know how they have all that crap on the walls, all
Right.
the old timey stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I look up, and there was one of our banana crates, one of our
Wow. Wow.
banana boxes, and that
Wow.
freaked me out. And I just
Yeah.
got real excited about that.
I'll bet you did. Yeah. So, what year was it um, when you were at Gulfport and then transitioned over to Wilmington?
I was in Gulfport for about 18 months,
Uh,
and and and
so that was
and then they said,
99 more or less, or
no, maybe more like 2000, 2001. I wasn't the first guy to come into Gulfport. I was the set. Yeah, they had hired this guy. My brother Mark was there for a while, but they said you did well with Gulfport. We think you're ready to take over Wilmington, which was a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of fun because it was so exciting. I mean, it's like everything's flying around everywhere. We were repacking bananas for Aldi,
uh,
and to the tune of like, let's see, probably between about 25 loads, 25 to 50 loads a week, depending upon uh,
wow.
what was going on. We had about 75 guys that would flip the open top box onto a padded table, and
Uh,
we had deli scales, and we
uh,
everything was bagged like the club pack, and
right.
we put the hand of bananas on a scale, slap a sticker on it, throw it back in the box. But we do that to the tune of maybe 15 to 15 loads a day.
Oh my God. Wow. Say, and listen, those stickers, getting back to those stickers, the originals had gold leaf on them, didn't they?
Gold leaf, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Imagine having a few of those today. That's another example of the ingenuity there. Now, that was your dad's idea, or had your grandfather started that?
I think it was my dad's idea
Uh-huh.
because maybe it was my grandfather's. To give you an idea, my grandfather died in 1949.
Uh-huh.
So my mom and dad were married. They were about ready to celebrate their 65th anniversary, and my mom passed away.
I'm
But
sorry to hear.
she never met him. Well,
Uh-huh.
we're all going to be there, bud.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's so cool. And so then the other thing that's interesting, we were talking about this today. What you guys had a really unique relationship with the major chains. I mean, they probably needed you as much as you needed them. I mean, it was a symbiotic relationship, and you could get the buyers on the line, and they were talking to you and letting you know how many loads they needed and where they wanted them dropped off. What
Hmm.
states were you covering?
Oh my God. Most of the Eastern Seaboard. I don't remember ever going into Florida,
Mhm.
uh, but North Carolina. I think North Carolina, uh, into Arkansas. Uh, I think we went into Texas and Des Moines, and just pretty much that, and then
Wow.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And we also had distribution into southern Ontario.
Hmm. Wow.
And
Very
I
cool.
mean, Chiavetti was the powerhouse out there, and nothing against Chiavetti; they're good company. They're all good companies,
Hmm.
but we had little niches with certain people.
Hmm. Got you. And so when you were going, you were the trucks were heading up to the Midwest. You were delivering in the Chicago area,
Oh yeah, Chicago,
Jewels, and those
Indianapolis,
chain stores.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
Uh, 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 let's see, Milwaukee.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, I, Most of these towns I can't remember because
Right.
lots of them. Ohio,
So
Cleveland, Columbus,
yeah.
uh, every major city. Yeah.
So an interesting factoid in there. That highway that goes from Gulfport to Chicago is the Magnolia Highway. So it leaves the Magnolias and goes up to the Midwest. Just little things we pick up when we study the
It
Florida
goes
Gulf
into the
Port.
snow belt. All right.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, you were about in Wilmington. You come back to Detroit at that point.
Yes. I came back to Detroit, and I decided, as I told my brother Mark, I was away from my home so much.
Mhm.
Uh, I, I I didn't like it. I
Yep.
wanted to be closer to my family. My
Sure.
family needed me. I had
Right.
young kids, and I said, switch with me.
Mhm.
And the forces of business uh, succumbed. Um, we really didn't have any competition for what we did because we were doing something that the other guys weren't doing. But one of the other banana retailers were looking at us as competition, and
Mhm.
they were able to wrestle away about 50% of our business away from one of our major supermarket chains. And with all these vehicles, we don't own 450 trucks. We have loans for 450 trucks.
Right.
We have
You lease
loans
them.
for
Yeah. Okay.
450 trailers. Yeah.
And you
So
had 450 drivers you had to deal with, huh?
oh my God. Here, I'll tell you a story.
Uh-huh.
Uh, we were expected into Batavia, which is the Chicago uh, the Chicago distribution center for Aldi,
Uh-huh.
and we had a window of so many hours, and we sent this guy out. It usually takes about 48 hours to get out there, and they're supposed to they pull into the lot, and they fall asleep, and they'll go knock on his door and wake him up, and he'll back up, and they get to him, or we get a phone call from the distribution center saying, is your truck arriving with our bananas? And I said, he should be there. He should have been there 8 hours ago. And he says, well, we haven't seen him. So we got on a GPS, and he was in Peoria. He was 5 hours away.
I guess he didn't have a GPS, huh? Or his
Well,
GPS let him.
here's the kicker.
Mhm.
To our distribution, we had a guy that was handling the trucking end of the business.
Mhm.
He sends a guy out, another driver, flies him out to Peoria with an
Oh
extra set of
wow.
keys,
Uh-huh.
picks up the load of bananas.
Uh-huh.
The next day, the guy calls up, and the driver who took the load, he says,
The
"You're never going to
original
believe this.
driver?
Your truck got stolen." I said, "No, it
Oh
didn't.
no. Oh
It
no.
didn't get stolen." I said, I said, "You're going to have to explain to your wife because she knows exactly where you are in Peoria,
Uh-huh.
and we've let you go, right?
Uh-huh.
And while you're with this other gal shacking up." And
The
I mean,
nuances of the
there's some
business.
stories there. There's a lot of
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. So let's go back to when you did you start the packaging division at Badalament?
Yes, I was there. And of course,
It all
I had
started with that load of bags that your
yeah,
brother
trash bags, retail trash bags.
he saw there's gold in them there hills. He saw some value to getting into carving out that niche, huh?
Well, really, what made all the difference in the world is my dad and my dad's relationship with supermarket chains. Because, I would show up to Farmer Jack's, and I'd sit down with their buyer, who was a real hard guy, tough guy to, get along. And uh, they knew the family. The owners loved my dad. So when I walk in with trash bags, I've got I've got tailwind behind me. So I
Right.
show it to him, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I just came in there with a price, and I
Uh,
said, "Yeah, okay, send us 2 truckloads." I go, okay,
that was the
and
easiest thing you ever did in your
they
life,
would turn
huh?
around and they'd put these. They were trash bags, 50 on a roll.
Uh-huh.
All right, and it was sleeved up, so it was a long, skinny, like a
Yes.
cylinder. And he
Right.
put them all by the front registers, and they
Mhm.
sold.
Wow. Wow.
So they were happy with it, and
Uh-huh.
it kind of gave me a good kickstart. And then when
Yeah.
I went into the stores, I knew a lot of these guys because they used to come in the morning to buy
Mhm.
bananas from us.
Mhm.
But the big chains never came into our place. It
Mhm.
was always on the phone or a relationship. You'd go to see them.
Right.
But
And when they got a hold of you, you were the big banana, huh? when they heard it was Badalament on the line, we're talking to the big banana.
Yeah, yeah. I would call up in the morning, and sometimes I used to open up and I'd call up at Farmer Jack's and I'd say, hey, we need to know what you need in bananas, and they'll say, wait a minute, and then you get on the phone here and go, Banana Man is on the phone. What do we need? Banana
That's
Man.
a classic. That's a classic. Now, in 2005, you shut down the business after
Mhm.
103 years in. But now comes the resilient Tom Badalament, and you make a transition to Texas.
Well, it
And
didn't happen. It didn't happen that quick. I had some rough years. It's like when they shut the doors down, uh, I was still in Detroit. And Detroit's a depressed market,
Mhm.
and I went to all my buddies and I said, "Hey, I need a job," and they were all pretty condescending. They said, "Hey, you're a smart guy. You're going to land on your feet." And I ended up going to work for a friend of mine in the packaging business named Jason Chang. He owns a company called Fantapack, or he did at the time. He sold out, and he says, Tom, he says, I want you to run a division of the company that sells packaging. He called it agricultural. And he says, so we started calling on, and his specialty was zipper slider lock product. And we started calling on the great marketing guys out in Delano, in the San Joaquin Valley. And I started calling on the hydroponic guys out in BC and in Leamington, Ontario. I dabbled in doing clamshells. There was a substrate called PLA. It wasn't a plastic. It was made out of, it's called polylactic acid. It's a corn-based product, but it was very expensive, and the only one manufacturer was Cargill. And so you never want to put all your eggs in that one basket. So I got into that, and I was out of that fairly quickly. But I migrated back to packaging, and while I got into packaging, I had amassed quite a knowledge of food packaging, label law, and I had a little, I say, sideline hustle. My business was called Tom Badalament Design. I would work with new purveyors coming to market where I would help them get ready to sell retail in supermarkets, and it was fun, but I just didn't have enough businesses to sustain that. So I ended up going to work for a friend of mine. She owned a pickling company in Michigan, and then that was not going anywhere. I doubled her business, but it wasn't going anywhere. So I decided that I needed to move in a different direction, and that's when I moved to Texas.
interesting. And now you're a land man, cutting deals between Midland and Odessa, huh?
Well, no, not. I'm all over the state, and when you say landman, that technically means that you are dealing with oil leases in
Right,
Texas.
right.
I'm a commercial realtor that specializes in land. Okay, and I'll sell. I've got property all over the state that I sell for people, and also I kind of specialize in industrial commercial realty. Dealing with manufacturers, dealing with people that would need a warehouse, and I'm not in a multifamily. I'm not into office buildings. That's a different beast unto itself. But I seem to do well with
Fantastic,
land.
fantastic. And of course, the one constant in your life, well, there are probably several, but music has always been there with you. And
Music.
I want to tell all our Menlo friends and everybody who's listening, tune in to YouTube and hear the tunes that Tom is putting together. And you still play with bands. You've got that going on, and you haven't lost your rhythm. You go into an HEB and you talk to the produce guy like you haven't missed a beat. Huh? Tell us that story.
I was in Odessa, Texas, and I go into an HEB, and I'm looking at 22 cash registers running simultaneously. And Odessa is a tertiary market. It's not a primary. It's not Houston, but this little HEB is humming along. And I happened to run into the store director, And I said, "You're doing about $2 million a day, aren't you? $2 million a week, aren't you?" And he looked at me and says, "How would you know that?" I said, "The guys at Kroger taught me a few things too. You can kind of tell from how many cash registers that are running and how long it's going." And I said, I can tell from they had like 60 feet of banana display. I said, "You're going through about 985 cases of bananas a week." And the store director says, "How do you know that?" I said, "Well, I was in that business for many years." And he says, "I don't know how many bananas I go through." So he calls up his produce manager. He goes, "How many bananas did we sell last week?" He says, "Oh, we sold about 960 bananas." He goes, but so I like talking to the produce guys. I was over at Costco where I'm at, and I walk in, I see this guy putting up produce, and I'm talking to him, and he says, "Yeah, I used to be a buyer over at HEB." And I said, "Now there's a beauty into being an Indian instead of a chief." I said, "There's no heat breathing down your back." And he gives me a look like a side eye, like he says, "You know that?" And I said, "Oh, I know it well. I know, I know it
There you
well."
go. Well,
But
it's
I'll tell you one more story.
okay.
Uh, when I was with Safety Specialty Foods, this is the pickling company. I was in at Kroger, and this guy comes in. He says, "I need a 10% deduction straight across the board. 10%. We're not getting fat off this stuff." And I said, and he's on the muscle. He's trying to show me that he's got some power over me. And I said, "Can I make it up on the fourth quarter?" And he goes, "Yes, you can make it up on the fourth quarter." I said, "You got your 10%." So you got to know how to read buyers. You got to realize that they're being constantly hit upon by their superiors to get a cheaper price, to get a better deal, and unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, they need us as much as we need them, and it's got to be in a give and a take. And if they're taking advantage of you in such a way that you can't make any money, stay at home.
Mhm.
Stay at
Right.
home.
Right. Exactly.
Let them have one less player in the business,
Uh,
and see how that works for them. Because while the cart is pulling the horse these days, that'll change around again. It will, because that's
yeah.
history.
Yeah. And we were talking about something else. It's frustrating for a lot of importer distributors who knock on that door every day, pick up the phone, and they think they're going to sell a chain store buyer, etc. And it just doesn't happen. And we were talking about that. Can you fill us in on how the contract business works?
Yeah, supermarket chains love contracts because while they may pay a little bit more for it on a weekly basis, the produce industry is not a perfect business. In fact, when things go right, you scratch your head and say, "How am I going to do it again next week?" And if there's a flood someplace, or you can't get product, and the banana business is loaded with excuses, a whole lot of excuses. And well, the gods at Westlake, I used to get from the Dole buyer. He'd say they're saying that they got beetles coming in on boatloads, and they're going to need another 50 cents this week on a box. Of course, they hit everybody, but if you're on a 3-year contract, that doesn't play with the supermarket chains. That's where they have an advantage, and they'll raise their price so they can make a few extra pennies, because that's the name of the game. The game is not made on the sell; it's made on the buy.
Mhm.
And yeah, they love it. They love it. But if you have something that someone else doesn't have, you need to get out to the decision makers and show it to them, and show them how they can save money, because there's very few produce people left in the produce business. It's all bean counters these days, and they're
Isn't
not
that the
really
truth? Yeah.
they're not looking for a great mango. They're
Hmm.
looking for a piece of wax that looks like a great mango.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about the story. We go all the way back to Menlo, and you get a phone call to deliver a certain vehicle to a certain person, and
Oh,
you
oh,
and Alex hop in the vehicle. Tell us about this story here.
Menlo College was a really interesting place, and I know that Will hasn't mentioned it to you. I was a little Midwest guy, and I came to the school. I knew nothing about it. When we got there, we had crown princes of Saudi Arabia that were there. We had countless millionaire sons. What was the name of the guy whose father started Commodore Computer?
Gary Tramiel.
Gary. Yeah, Gary Tramiel. Gary started out his freshman year driving a Jaguar XJS, and second semester he came to school in a Ferrari 308 TV
Mind-boggling, huh?
GTP. Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean 18 years old. Can you imagine with the insurance? And that was his everyday car.
yeah, yeah.
But Gary was a
Crazy.
good guy, really sweet man, nice guy.
Yeah.
But I had a friend of mine. His name was Alex Forte. Great guy. His mother was American. His father was a duke in Rome.
Uh-huh.
And he was close with this one gal named Elizabeth. Beautiful. This gal looked like she stepped out of Victoria's Secret. And she was being courted by one of the crown princes of Saudi Arabia. And he had given her a Ferrari 308 GTB. And she called Alex up and she says, look, I'm going down to LA to be at a party and I want my Ferrari with me. She goes, but I got to fly with Faisal. She goes, would you drive it down? So Alex called me up and he says, do you want to drive down with me? And he says, it's more than that. It's got diplomat plates. We were going down Highway 5 at 140 miles an hour and there would be no
Good
cop that
Lord.
could stop us.
Uh-huh. Those are the good old Menlo days. It's been a pleasure talking to you,
Hey,
and I look forward to
I
doing
have a
it
story
again.
about you and me.
Uh-huh. What story is this, Tom?
Well, Will and I were friends, but we weren't real close. And it was a Saturday night, Friday night, and we were drinking beers. And
From the
and
famous liquor store across the street
across
that
the
we
street,
helped to fund,
Beltrano's,
Beltrano's.
was that right?
Yeah,
It was
Beltrano's liquor store.
and and we had this wild ass idea that we were going to fly to Spain.
That was my MO after a few drinks. Let's fly around the world.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds great. So we called up the airline and said, what does a flight cost if we left tonight? Well, it would have cost $1,000 round trip. And now, can you imagine? That was back in 1977, 78.
Right.
And it's probably like $9,000
Yeah,
today.
good Lord.
And
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, my dad would have killed me. I didn't have $1,000 in my
I didn't
account.
either, to tell the truth. It sounded like a good idea, though.
Yeah, I think we ended up falling asleep and
And thank God, huh? Thank God for unanswered prayers. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. And
Will, thanks so much for having me. If I shed any light, hey, come listen to my.
yeah,
I'm Tom Badalament. I'm on YouTube, and I'm posting every day. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Apple Music, and trust me, this idea is not to make a lot of money. It's just to have fun.
right.
And the songs are inside me. So I appreciate you having me, Will.
My
And
pleasure.
God bless you.
And hopefully
Norma, thanks for
you'll come
everything.
to
We'll
one of
talk
our
to you later.
events. We'll have you as a guest speaker. And in addition to that, you've written two beautiful songs for us about the five pillars, the IMO and the IPO. And they'll be playing on the exit here, the intro and the exit. So thanks again, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
You got it.